I was elbow deep in a server config on my laptop when he came stomping in like he owned the goddamn city, not the office, not the building, the whole damn grid of downtown San Diego. He had that frat bro swagger, the kind that screams, I peaked in lacrosse. Dress shirt untucked, Patagonia vest like it was armor, and sunglasses still on inside. Riley, the VP's favorite sperm, officially titled Digital Operations Evangelist, which apparently meant wandering around making everyone else's job harder. He didn't even look at the other 20 people on the floor, just locked eyes on me like I was a Roomba that missed a spot, marched right up, leaned over my desk, and snapped his fingers. Snapped his fingers. Hey, tech girl, Wi-Fi's down, fix it. I didn't flinch, just looked up and said, I'm working on your lease infrastructure right now. He scoffed, actually scoffed, like the idea of something as unsexy as lease infrastructure couldn't possibly matter to a guy who thought cloud meant where his playlists lived. You're fired. It landed like a fart in church. The floor went dead quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Every mouse click paused midair. Even the little intern by the coffee machine froze with a paper cup halfway to her lips. So I stood up, calmly, slid my laptop into my bag, picked up the unsigned lease renewal packet he was too dumb to notice had his company name on it, and walked out. Not a word, not a glare, not a single dramatic pause, just quiet, precise steps through a room full of people now suddenly realizing that Riley might have just nuked something bigger than a Wi-Fi ticket. And hey, before we go any further, quick pause. If you're listening and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, it really helps the team behind these stories keep going. Takes 2 seconds. Toss a like too if Riley's already made your blood boil. We appreciate you. Back to the moment. I got to the elevator and finally let myself breathe. Not panic, just a long, slow exhale, because I knew something Riley didn't. 5 years ago, this building was a joke. Water damage in the basement, graffiti in the stairwells, tenants paying peanuts because the previous owner couldn't be bothered to fix the HVAC. I remember the day I walked through it for the first time. Everyone saw decay. I saw leverage. So I did what no one expected from a woman in boots and a ponytail. I bought it. Set up a Delaware LLC under my maiden name, just one of many boring little precautions you learn when you've been the only woman in rooms full of cocky tech boys too busy hearing themselves talk to ever ask what you're doing. I didn't hang a plaque. I didn't change my email signature. I let Winter's property management take the credit, let Doug be the face, and I stayed the ghost in the walls, fixing infrastructure and quietly holding every lease like it was a loaded weapon. And Riley couldn't spell due diligence if it was tattooed on his abs. I made it back to the landlord's suite, just 2 floors up, and walked straight to my terminal. Pulled up the tenant portal, found their lease. Clicked open, clause 14C. Landlord may terminate or decline renewal if tenant harasses authorized representative. Security footage already synced to the dashboard. Crystal clear audio. Hey, tech girl. Fix it. You're fired? Like a goddamn highlight reel of arrogance. I didn't even need to type a note, just hit submit, attach the clip, and flag the record for non-renewal. Didn't yell, didn't storm, didn't rage post on Slack. Because when you own the building, policy is revenge. The funny thing is, Riley wasn't even wrong. I was the tech girl. I'd fixed more underfloor cabling in that building than most men named Chad have fixed their own egos. I'd soldered fiber through drop ceilings, rerouted entire server rooms during upgrades, rewired breaker panels when a contractor botched a subfloor redo. Hell, I even brought donuts to the 3 a.m. Outage once because I knew the nosy guys would forget to eat. But here's the part Riley didn't know, because Riley never asked. And more importantly, never read a goddamn lease. 5 years back, this building was a dying husk on B Street. A dented hunk of concrete slouching between 2 overpriced towers, practically begging to be bulldozed or flipped into a vape lounge. Every window had a crack, the basement flooded every third rain, and there were so many rats we started naming them. The rent? Dirt cheap, no parking, no security, and no interest from anyone with half a brain in commercial real estate. Except me. I'd just been screwed out of a job at a startup where the CEO thought I was too intense to lead infrastructure. Funny how intense looks like competent when it's coming from someone with a Y chromosome and a Patagonia pullover. I cashed out my equity, peanuts, but enough to make a move, and started hunting for something most people wouldn't touch. This building was it. Ugly, forgotten, but structurally sound with zoning on its side. It was the kind of place you could either pity or rebuild. I chose the second, took everything I had, all the savings, all the quiet rage. I set up a Delaware LLC under my maiden name. Nothing flashy, just paperwork. Winters Holdings, it said, generic enough to disappear. The LLC bought the property at auction. No big announcement, no press release, just a signature. Mine. Then came the work. I spent 2 years grinding, not just renovations, contracts, negotiations, permits, hell, even wrangling the city inspectors who assumed I was someone's assistant every time I showed up with a clipboard. One of them actually asked me, "Can we speak to the man in charge?" I smiled and handed him the LLC papers. "He's busy. I'll be taking the meeting." I didn't plaster my name on anything. Let Winter's property management be the face. Doug, the building manager, was ex-Navy, ran things clean, and knew how to keep his mouth shut. He handled tenant walkthroughs, lease renewals, maintenance schedules. Meanwhile, I floated like a ghost, fixing Wi-Fi, updating access panels, getting called tech girl by morons who didn't realize they were shouting at the owner of the damn walls around them. I knew every lease clause by heart. Especially 14C, that one was mine. Wrote it myself with a little help from a very expensive lawyer who now sends me Christmas cookies every year. And Riley? Riley probably thought leases were just things you clicked agree on, like Instagram's terms of service. He was the kind of guy who skimmed contracts like they were dating app bios. Cute layout, pretty fonts, nothing that mattered. Nobody ever asked who actually signed their lease renewals. They just emailed Doug, who emailed me, and everything got processed through the Winter system. Invisible, efficient, quiet, until Riley got loud. That day, when he snapped at me like I was a golden retriever, I realized something deeply satisfying. He thought I was just another contractor, another woman paid to smile and nod while he played boss. He didn't know he'd just snapped his fingers at the landlord, and the landlord didn't like noise. Back at my office, just 2 floors up, same building, nicer windows, I poured myself a cup of burnt break room coffee and watched the security footage again. Riley's little tantrum, my calm exit. It was all time-stamped, backed up, and logged in the system. That clause I wrote, it didn't need interpretation, it needed action. And action, in my world, comes with paperwork. No raised voice, no public meltdown, just a few keystrokes. A formal notice. A decision that would echo down every hallway of that overpriced co-working kingdom. Let them wonder who pulled the plug. It was the tech girl, the one who owned the fuse box. I didn't go to HR, there was no point. HR in startups like theirs is just the same couch they cry on when the board yells at them. Soft, useless, and paid to protect the men who throw tantrums in Patagonia vests. I'd seen enough fake apologies wrapped in performance reviews to know better. Instead, I walked 2 floors up, badge still active, heels clicking soft on the polished concrete like I'd done it 100 times, because I had. Past the co-working floor, past the snack bar where Riley once demanded to know if the oat milk was gluten-free, and straight into my office. Not the leasing office, not property management, mine. Same drywall, different gravity. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the servers behind the wall and the chirp of my login credentials loading the tenant dashboard. One monitor pulled up the security feed from earlier that day. The other showed Riley's lease. I didn't even need to search for it. I'd bookmarked it. Lease number 0127 RW, signed 17 months ago, renewed once. Next renewal date, 6 weeks out. I clicked into the clause index, scrolled to 14C. There it was. My little insurance policy. Landlord may terminate or decline renewal if tenant harasses, threatens, or otherwise disrespects any authorized representative of the property. Written in neutral legalese, but razor sharp beneath the bland phrasing. I remember the lawyer blinking at me when I insisted on the disrespects line. Seems vague, he said. Exactly, I replied. I wanted to cover finger snaps. He laughed. I didn't. Now, here we were. I clicked the Attach Evidence button and dragged over the video file from the security system. The whole thing was there, Riley barging into the conference area. Finger snap. Hey, tech girl. Me, replying calmly. Him, barking, you're fired. My exit. Crystal clear audio, no ambiguity, no wiggle room for PR spin. I watched the playback once, not out of doubt, just confirmation. He looked so smug, so sure of himself, like a toddler in a business shirt pretending to be king of the castle. A king who just fired the architect of the drawbridge. I hit send, No rage, no drama, just business. The system automatically flagged the lease for internal legal review and tenant notification. A digital paper trail that couldn't be unsent, couldn't be sweet-talked away. No meetings, no fake apologies, no HR rep blinking through a scripted checklist with words like perception and intent. Just action. Cold. Legal. Final. That's the thing about power people don't get. It's not loud. It's not chest puffing or title waving or yelling in meetings. Real power sits in a locked clause written 18 months before some idiot thought he could bark orders without reading the fine print. I leaned back in my chair, sipped the coffee, still bitter, still burnt, and waited. Because once that clause was flagged, the machine would move on its own. Riley didn't know it yet, but the countdown had already started. He thought I was done. But policy was just beginning. Riley was in the break room, holding court like he'd just pulled off some Machiavellian masterstroke instead of what actually happened. Publicly humiliating someone he didn't understand in front of 20 witnesses and a security camera that doesn't blink. He was leaned back against the counter, one foot propped like he was posing for a catalog titled Startup Prick Monthly, sipping a LaCroix and bragging about establishing dominance. Someone had made the mistake of laughing. That's all it took for Riley to go full TED Talk, blathering on about setting expectations and how sometimes you gotta trim the weak links early. You'd think he'd solved water scarcity, not booted a woman mid-sentence for not bowing fast enough to his fragile little ego. He was still talking when Doug walked in. Now, let me explain Doug. Former Navy. Doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't need to. He's built like a refrigerator and wears the same navy blue work shirt every day with Winter's Property MGMT stitched on the chest in thread that's faded from actual labor, not Etsy irony. People respected Doug. Hell, half the tenants thought he was the property owner. Doug never corrected them. Neither did I. He came in holding a manila folder, standard property file, thick with tenant reports and renewal docs. He scanned the room once, eyes like steel sweeping across beanbags and kombucha taps, then landed on Riley. "Where's the woman you just fired?" Riley didn't even blink, smirked, like Doug was about to give him a medal. "IT chick, she got lippy." Doug didn't smile. "You just terminated the property owner's agent." The room stilled. Somewhere, someone's Slack notification dinged, but nobody moved. Even the snack bar fridge seemed to hum quieter. Riley blinked, still holding the smirk like it was bulletproof. "Wait, what? No, she was tech, right? Infrastructure?" Doug stepped forward, calm, heavy. "She was here to renew your lease." That landed like a sucker punch. Someone near the standing desk audibly whispered, "Oh shit." Doug didn't pause. "She's not anymore." That's when it hit the room, like a chill through the air vents. 1 second, it was startup banter. The next, funeral silence. You could feel the shift, the collective realization that Riley had just pulled the pin on a grenade he didn't know he was holding. One of the interns, bright kid named Sasha, glanced nervously at the folder in Doug's hand, then at Riley, who was now very much not smiling. "She owns this building?" she whispered, barely audible. Doug looked at her, didn't answer. Just raised one eyebrow like now you're starting to get it. Riley was pale. "No, hold on. That can't be right. I was told Doug runs the leases." Doug cut him off, just a slight shift in posture, calm and final. "I manage what she lets me manage. You weren't paying for me. You were paying for the square footage she lets you sit in." Another beat of silence. It wasn't just embarrassment now, it was math. Numbers clicking into place. Riley realizing the conference room he just threw someone out of, her conference room. The desk he leaned on, her desk. The servers he'd called laggy last week, wired on her dime. And the lease, the one up for renewal? Yeah, that too. Sasha broke the silence again, voice dry. "So, we're screwed." Doug didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. He just handed the folder off to one of the office assistants, turned, and walked back out without another word. No raised voice, no drama, just a reminder that silence doesn't mean absence. And the woman Riley snapped at? The tech girl? She was the one who made sure his keycard worked every morning, until she didn't. They waited a few hours before calling. Long enough to realize something was wrong, but not long enough to understand how deep it went. I imagine the conversation on their end started somewhere around who actually owns the building, and spiraled into, wait, does that clause hold up? And finally, call legal, now. My cell rang at 3:12 p.m. Caller ID blocked. Cute. I let it ring twice before answering. Calm, balanced. The same tone I used when asking contractors why they thought zip ties were an acceptable substitute for conduit brackets. Ms. Winters, the voice said, slick, rehearsed, corporate silk with a nervous undertone. This is Nathan Coulson, General Counsel for Stratwell and Pierce. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Of course there had. He cleared his throat. We understand there may have been an unfortunate interaction between one of our junior VPs and a member of your staff. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, there was no misunderstanding. A pause, longer than necessary. I pictured him scrolling his notes, trying to find the version of reality where Riley snapping his fingers like I was his barista could be downgraded to a tone issue. We'd like to formally express our regret, he said, and, pending your approval, reauthorize her engagement and continue discussions regarding renewal. I'm not terminated, I said softly. Silence. I let it hang, then added, but your renewal is. Another pause, this one sharper. I'm sorry, I don't believe I've already filed the 30-day non-renewal. It was submitted through the portal at 11:38 a.m. I heard his breath hitch. Not dramatic, just enough for me to know he didn't expect the paperwork to be done. They always assume emotion slows women down, that we pout, lick our wounds, rant and slack. They never imagine we go straight to the claws. He tried to pivot. I'm sure this can be resolved through further discussion. I'm sure it can't, I said. Then I opened the email draft I'd queued up 20 minutes earlier. No attachments, no subject line bait. Just a clean body text with a direct quote from their lease. Clause 14C. Landlord may terminate or decline renewal if tenant harasses, threatens, or otherwise disrespects any authorized representative of the property. Then, time-stamped video evidence filed with property services, non-renewal processed, sent. I could hear him reading it in real time, the silence growing thicker by the second. Behind that silence, I could almost hear Riley stomping around their floor, yelling about unfair treatment, while someone desperately tried to remind him they signed a legally binding agreement. That words like terminate and disrespect aren't just emotional daggers, they're structural triggers. You're certain there's no room for Your team had an opportunity to build a relationship with their landlord. Instead, they snapped their fingers at her and called her tech girl. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. The call ended not with a bang, but with a corporate sigh and a weak promise to circle back. They never did. They were too busy circling the drain. And me? I went back to my wiring diagram for a rooftop solar upgrade. Because while they were panicking, I was building, as always. By Thursday morning, they'd moved from panicked calls to what they probably thought was diplomacy. Someone from their operations team emailed asking if I'd be open to an in-person reset meeting to align on forward expectations. It was written in that flavorless corporate word salad that's supposed to feel neutral, but always reeks of damage control. They even CC'd Doug, as if looping in the building manager would somehow soften me. I didn't respond. A few hours later, a follow-up pinged in. Urgent lease matter, requesting a brief sit-down at your convenience. At my convenience. Now they were getting it. I waited until 4:00 p.m., then sent one clean reply with 3 things attached. An updated notice of lease termination, signed, dated, and countersigned by legal. A confirmation of filing with San Diego's commercial lease registry. A preview link to the building's listing on 3 major brokerage platforms, scheduled to go live at 10:00 a.m. Friday morning. The subject line read, Alignment on forward expectations. The body, you're welcome to apply again, but market rate's gone up 22%. No emojis, no snark, just a mirror held up to the consequences. They didn't reply. And that silence? It didn't hurt me. It vindicated every step I'd taken, every inspection fought for, every clause I'd pushed to include, every time I kept my mouth shut while someone talked down to me about scalability or synergies like they'd invented the words. This wasn't revenge. It was return on investment. They'd signed a lease with a landlord they never saw and thought that meant she didn't exist, thought I was just one of the help. A walking patch cable, disposable, replaceable, invisible. And yet here I was, politely removing their access to 6,100 square feet of prime downtown real estate. I knew what was coming next. Internal finger pointing, PR scrambling, maybe a few late night calls to pivot friendly brokers who'd already seen my listing and raised their rates accordingly. They'd burn time, money, and caffeine trying to fix what Riley's ego detonated in 9 seconds of finger snapping arrogance. I didn't need to watch it unfold. Instead, I got a coffee from the cafe on the corner, staffed, ironically, by people Riley used to call the real heroes, and walked the block back to my building. My building. I stood on the sidewalk across the street and looked up at the windows, reflecting the setting sun in rows of gold. You know what I saw? Room. Room for someone who knows what it costs to build something. Room for a better tenant. Room for someone who reads the fine print and respects the person behind the paperwork. I took one last sip, then opened my phone and pulled up the dashboard. Friday's listing was already gaining bookmarks. 2 inquiries. One flagged priority. Funny, the moment you stop letting people treat you like a utility, that's when they realize you were infrastructure all along. Move-out day came with the same awkward energy as a breakup where one party still thinks it's temporary. Their team trickled in early, eyes darting, shoulders hunched, like maybe I wouldn't show up. Like maybe if they packed fast enough, I'd forget to enforce the deadline. I was already there. Clipboard in hand, hair tied back, neutral face on. I didn't need to scowl or stomp around like some property warlord. My presence alone was enough. I was the woman Riley had snapped at like a vending machine, now holding the checklist that decided whether or not their deposit evaporated. And oh, it would. Cables were left snaking across desks like afterthoughts. 2 Herman Miller chairs missing. Coffee station half dismantled. Someone had even scrawled "bye bitch" in dry erase marker on the inside of a meeting room whiteboard, as if passive aggression was a substitute for a functioning business strategy. I snapped a photo, deleted it, not worth keeping. Riley? Nowhere in sight. Of course not. The man had disappeared faster than a crypto portfolio in 2022, where it was he'd been quietly moved to remote advisory status, which is rich, considering the only thing he'd advise anyone to do was fix the Wi-Fi while he made decks full of stolen buzzwords and mood board screenshots. His team, though, they showed up, sheepish, tired. Some of them looked downright embarrassed to make eye contact. A few avoided me altogether, but not all. Near the kitchen alcove, a girl I recognized from their marketing team paused while boxing up some leftover swag. She was maybe mid-20s, sharp eyes, sharp shoes, the kind of woman who saw things others missed. She looked at me, really looked. "Wait," she said, "do you actually own this place?" I stopped checking sockets, met her gaze. "I do," I said. "You could say I built the Wi-Fi you were yelling about." Her eyebrows lifted, and then she laughed. Not mockingly, more like something clicked. "I knew something was off," she said. "You didn't flinch when he said that. Most people flinch." I smiled. "I don't flinch when people misunderstand leverage." She let out a low whistle. "So, he really fired his own landlord?" I nodded. "And his renewal in 1 sentence." She stood there for a second, arms full of half-used branded notebooks and what looked like a ring light, and then shook her head with a grin. "You win." I didn't respond, just walked past, checking off items on my list as I moved through the emptying floor. Wires, unplugged. Fridge, cleaned, mostly. Projector, still mounted, but they left the remote behind. As I passed the glass-walled breakout room, I caught a glimpse of a vision board Riley had made during their Q1 planning week. It said, "Think bigger. Disrupt the status quo." Guess I did. By noon, their team was gone. The keycards deactivated, security badges collected, deposit forfeited, not for vengeance, but for the simple fact that negligence has a cost. I stood in the echoing office and let the silence settle. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. Clean, like the click of a lock turning behind you. Then I walked back to my suite, entered the final clearance into the tenant portal, and archived their folder. They had occupied space, but I had owned it, and now that space was free. 3 weeks later, the floor that Riley once swaggered through like a rented frat god was humming again, but this time with quieter energy, focused, intentional, the kind of presence you feel when people are building something, not just posturing over LaCroix and noise-canceling headsets. The new tenants were a sustainability startup out of Portland. 2 founders, lean team, strong mission, zero ego. They toured the space like people who understood what it meant to earn square footage, not inherit it from a family connection, and assume the walls would bend to your will. They were the kind of people who said thank you after a tour, who reviewed the lease before signing, who asked questions like, "What's your preferred vendor for HVAC service?" instead of barking, "Why is it so hot in here?" while sweating through a dress shirt and blaming the thermostat. Respectful, on time, transparent, they signed within 5 days, paid the full deposit in a single transfer. And then, this part got me, they asked if I'd be willing to consult on their digital systems, said they'd heard I had deep infrastructure experience and that they didn't want to slap together a tech stack with whatever junior sysadmin fiber spat out. "Your wiring is immaculate," the co-founder said, admiring one of the server alcoves like it was an art piece. "We'd rather build on what already works." I nodded. "I can design a scalable backend that'll grow with your ops team without bottlenecking security or bandwidth." He blinked. "You already thought about that?" "5 years ago," I said. He smiled. "Let's talk consulting." And just like that, I went from invisible to indispensable on my own terms. The day they moved in, I was there. Not with a clipboard, not walking behind them like a manager checking boxes, but at the entrance, greeting them like the steward of a space that finally had the right people inside it. They installed a simple frosted glass plaque beside the door, just like every other tenant had. Only this one didn't say Winter's Property MGMT. It said my name, my full name, no alias, no shell company, no need to disappear behind branding and fake neutrality. Just who I was, printed clean and centered. For years, I kept quiet. Watched men like Riley stomp around, treating me like a keyboard with legs, never bothering to look beyond the job title or the hoodie. I let them underestimate me. Let them think I was background noise. Because sometimes, when you're building something real, you don't need to be loud. You just need to outlast. Now, I wasn't hiding behind anything. I was right there on the wall. And this time, no one would snap their fingers and forget me. 2 months later, in the slow stretch of an early Monday afternoon, I was sipping lukewarm coffee and combing through a fiber switch diagnostic when a ping hit my phone. LinkedIn. Normally, I don't bother with the platform unless I'm hunting vendors or checking for red flags on people trying to pitch me cloud integration like they just invented Ethernet. But this alert? It had Riley's name on it. Curiosity 1. I clicked. There he was, smiling in a black and white headshot that looked like it had been run through a dozen filters to erase anything resembling accountability. Captioned beneath in bold, all-caps confidence. Taking time to reflect. Looking forward to new leadership opportunities. He'd added a #gratitude hashtag and something about growing through adversity, which made me snort into my mug. Adversity? The man had confused his own ego imploding with a cosmic lesson. The post was trying so hard to look polished, it practically screamed desperation. Like a kid standing in the ashes of a Lego tower shouting, "I meant to do that." The comments were mostly bland, supportive fluff. "You got this." "Excited to see what's next." "Big things ahead." All the hollow cheerleading people post when they don't know how to say, "Dude, what happened?" But one comment stopped me cold, short, surgical, from one of his old coworkers, a woman I remembered from the move out, sharp, observant, the one who had connected the dots when no one else could see past his badge. It read, "Maybe start by learning who owns the roof over your head." No emojis, no LOL, no need, just a clean incision in the middle of all that noise. I didn't react, didn't like it. Didn't click anything, just read it once, smiled to myself, and went back to my fiber diagnostics. Because Riley wouldn't respond. He couldn't. What was he going to say? That woman I fired for not fixing the Wi-Fi fast enough actually owned the building and terminated our lease under a clause I didn't read? No. He'd stay silent. Let the comments sit there like a paper cut across his rebrand. No defense, no reply. Just public shade hanging like a storm cloud over his new growth mindset. That's the thing about consequences. They don't always come loud. Sometimes they show up in the comment section of the platform you use to sell your image. And sometimes they remind you that the woman you called tech girl was the architect of your downfall. One lease clause, one clipboard, one name on the plaque. That's all it took.